Welcome to Downtown Sports. My name is Downtown Stephen Brown, and in today's video, we're going to pick up where we left off yesterday, talking about Maple Leaf prospects, specifically Timothy Liljegren and Rasmus Sandin. And when it comes to those two prospects specifically, what are the Toronto Maple Leafs going to be doing with those two players, and what should happen with them, both in the short term and the long term? So if we come back to pick 224 here, you're going to see that Timothy Liljegren, in terms of primary points per game, so that's goals and the first assist in the American Hockey League this year. All these players are in the American Hockey League. And when we're looking at Timothy Liljegren, he's in his draft year +3. So he's 3 years removed from being eligible for the entry draft. And he's ahead of guys like Erik Brannstrom. And that's obviously in terms of primary points per games played. I'm not suggesting that Timothy Liljegren is a better prospect than Erik Brannstrom or that he's a better player than Erik Brannstrom at this point in their careers. It's merely just to provide some perspective on the situation. And when we're talking about Timothy Liljegren, he hasn't always been the best defensive defenseman. He's more of an offensive defenseman. He's similar to a guy that I was talking about in yesterday's video, Matt Hollowell, in that he's really good at making breakout passes and outlet passes, something that Jake Gardiner was really good for here in Toronto. He was always good at making that first pass or that stretch pass, and Timothy Liljegren has that ability as well. He's really good at breaking the puck out of his own zone and getting his forwards the puck in transition. And as a defenseman, as an offensive defenseman, that's an important quality to have. And I mean, he's still really young, being just 20 years old, turning 21 at the end of April. So if he's in that same offensive category as Erik Brannstrom, the main piece that the Ottawa Senators got back in return for Mark Stone, then I don't know why we're including this guy in every single castaway trade for whatever top 4 right-handed defenseman the Maple Leafs could get their hands on. I'm not opposed to trading Timothy Liljegren, but he would have to be the centerpiece in a deal that saw the Maple Leafs get back a right-handed shooting defenseman that can play in their top 4, a legitimate top 4 guy, no older than age 27, and has a decent contract. And I've described maybe 10 players in the league right there with that description. So it's just because Timothy Liljegren has the potential to be that in a couple of seasons if all goes to plan. All right, I think a lot of people are sleeping on him, and we shouldn't be so quick to write him off. He could be a serious part of the future for the Toronto Maple Leafs and form a very solid pairing with someone that he seems close with in Rasmus Sandin. So I've showed this in a video before, and these are individual seasons in the American Hockey League for defensemen under the age of 20. And you're going to see Erik Brannstrom on this list, and in terms of defensive prospects, he's kind of the gold standard right now. And Rasmus Sandin is also on this list for 10th. That means the Rasmus Sandin had the 10th best offensive season by a defenseman playing in the American Hockey League under the age of 20 ever. And obviously, players playing in the CHL don't get that opportunity to play in the American Hockey League at age 18 or age 19 or even earlier than that. So these results are obviously a little bit skewed. I'm not saying that he's the 10th best defensive prospect ever. I'm just saying that of the guys that are eligible to be playing in the American Hockey League at that age, he's one of the best. So we've kind of touched on what these players are right now, but what are the Maple Leafs going to be doing with them in the short term, like in the next 2 or 3 months? Well, with the Toronto Marlies sitting well out of a playoff spot, and we're really not sure what the American Hockey League is going to do with the rest of their season due to the COVID-19 or coronavirus, we don't really know. But the Toronto Marlies are probably not going to make the playoffs anyway, so their season is pretty much done there. So that means that the only way for these two players to continue playing games is going to be with the Toronto Maple Leafs this season. I think ideally you would have left those two players in the American Hockey League all year long and let them play on the top pair together, let them play on the power play, let them play on the penalty kill, and then they would have called them up full-time next season. Or they would have called them up and given them at least 9 games in the case of Rasmus Sandin this year, and they would have used Timothy Liljegren if there was an injury or not, so that they wouldn't have to burn Rasmus Sandin's first year of his entry-level contract. But when we're taking a look at Rasmus Sandin's game log here, he hasn't really been logging a whole ton of minutes when he has been with the Toronto Maple Leafs this season, and I don't necessarily think that that's the best for his development. And, okay, I would not rather play Cody Ceci over a guy like Rasmus Sandin. I'd rather see the kid making those mistakes than someone who's supposedly been in the league for 5+ years. But I can understand, for the same reason that Frederick Gauthier is in this lineup, he's been one of the Toronto Maple Leafs' most relied upon faceoff guys in the defensive zone this season. A coach is not going to just take that guy out of the lineup come playoff time. That guy's going to be staying in the lineup come playoff time because he needs to continue to rely on him to take those defensive zone faceoffs and win them at a rate that keeps him in the lineup, somewhere around 54% for Frederick Gauthier. And the penalty kill has been an item of concern this season, especially with all the injuries to the defensemen that the Maple Leafs have sustained over the course of this season. And Cody Ceci is a guy that kills penalties. I'm not saying that he does that well. I'm not saying that he should be doing that. And I'm not saying that Rasmus Sandin can't do that. I'm just saying that this season, Cody Ceci has been relied upon to do that. And Rasmus Sandin doesn't have experience on the penalty kill just yet. So in terms of the playoffs, I can see the logic in playing Cody Ceci over Rasmus Sandin. But don't get me wrong, we're at the point where we've already burned the first year of his entry-level contract. If there's a situation that arises where we would need to use him, I believe that he's first on this list here in terms of defensemen getting into the lineup. Maybe Calle Rosen is a little bit ahead of him. It depends on who gets injured here. If a penalty killer gets injured, Martin Marincin is going to go into the lineup. If a guy that's playing the power play gets injured, Rasmus Sandin is going to go into the lineup. And for Timothy Liljegren to be continuing to play games this season, I think 2 defensemen would have to get injured for him to be injected into this lineup. But next season is not too far away, and if you want to know more context of what's going on here, I suggest that you watch my video on how the Maple Leafs would deal with a flat or reduced salary cap. And it would explain why Andreas Johnsson and Travis Dermott are on LTIR. It would explain a lot of things on here if you watch that video, if you're interested, of course. But in terms of next season, I can see Timothy Liljegren and Rasmus Sandin being a pairing together full-time. And to have watched them progress through their year or so with the Marlies so far, to watch them progress in the NHL so far, I am really excited for what that pairing could be someday for the Toronto Maple Leafs. If you think back to the last couple of times that the Maple Leafs made deep runs into the playoffs, it was because they had a Swede on their team that just refused to quit. And also Gary Roberts would just murder people. But let me know what your thoughts and opinions are. What would you do with Timothy Liljegren and Rasmus Sandin in the short term and then again in the long term? And make sure to leave me a like on this video if you did like it and subscribe for more because more is always on the way. And guys, I appreciate all of your comments and stuff like that. I try to respond to everyone there. If I don't get to you right away, I promise you that I will. There's been a couple of you that even made your own armchair GMs and you want my opinions on them. If a couple more of you guys want to do that and you guys are comfortable with me featuring them in a video or whatnot, I'd be more than happy to do that. Or if you just want me to review it just on its own in the comment section and whatnot, I totally understand that too.